So welcome to another episode of Honest Cars. It's myself, Francisco Nwamba, and as usual, I am joined by Warren Ingram. Warren, how are you today?
I'm so good, thanks, Cisco. It's great to be on the show with you again. It feels like I need a bit of a dose of cars to take my mind off market. So I'm so glad to be chatting to you about cars.
No, very cool. Very, very cool. And like you say, the car world is always quite interesting. And I think of late, what has been on a lot of people's minds is used cars. The industry at the moment is in a very interesting flux, whereas because of parts shortages and world events, new cars are not as popular as what they used to be. So a lot of people are turning into the used market because they've got a bit more variety there. They're not having to wait for stock shortages. But at the same time, we know that with the demand comes a higher price. So there are also a bit of drawbacks when it comes to the used cars, buying a used car specifically. So today we want to discuss, when you are buying a used vehicle, what are certain things that consumers are concerned about? We've got consumers who ask themselves many questions. Am I getting the right deal? Am I getting ripped off? Am I getting treated correctly? So for you, Warren, when you've bought a vehicle, did you buy it new? Did you buy it used? And if you did buy it used, what were the certain things that you wanted, boxes that you wanted ticked?
So for people that know me well, they'll know that buying a new car for me is a real big no-no. I'm always going to buy a used car. And I think the key for me will be to buy a car where a lot of that new car kind of premium has gone out of the price. So I don't really want to buy a car that's got 1,000 Ks on the clock. Ideally, I'm looking for a car that at the very least has sort of done 10 or 15,000 kilometers, because my own logic there is it's still very new as far as I'm concerned. That's maybe a year old for at most for most people. And so I think a lot of the warranties and service plans, etc., will all be in place. But at the same time, I'm probably going to save myself, depending on the market. Of course, as you say, supply shortages are an issue, but I'm probably going to save myself, maybe 10 to 30% of the price of a new car. Key for me there will be that I understand the history of that car. So I'm very interested to hear, because it's always a worry for me, but I'm interested to hear if there are ways that we can see if a car's been in an accident, for example, because I don't want that. And certainly I want to know that the car's got a proper service history, it's been maintained correctly. And if I can, to find out who the driver of the car was. And it always worries me that I know it's discriminatory, but I don't really want a 21-year-old, who's using this as their Formula One car in the background. I'd prefer someone who kind of drives the car sedately and just kind of treats it as an important asset, rather than someone who's treating it badly. I want the car to come from a good owner. I'm always scared if I find the car was driven for all the time by a young owner, who, especially a young guy who thinks this is the time to kind of break every speed record there is. That would worry me a lot.
No, I can really understand your concern, and you're very right, because knowing who owned the vehicle prior to you is obviously extremely important. And the good thing is, because we live in the age of technology, there are ways and means for us to be able to find out the history of the vehicle. Has it been in an accident? And it all depends on, first and foremost, where you purchase your vehicle from, the brand that you're purchasing from at the same time, and also the kind of dealership as well, and the environment that you're buying your car from. As we know, I think just to make it easier for everybody, we're going to lean mainly on the example of buying a car from a dealership, because as we know, if you're buying a car from an individual, it is essentially foot stewards, as they say, and it is as is. So there's very little recourse from buying a vehicle from a person who is an individual, as opposed to buying a car from a business. So first and foremost, I think that would be the biggest recommendation that I would say to people, is that buy your vehicles from people that you can take the vehicle back. Or if you are going to buy a car from a private individual, make sure it's the kind of vehicle that still has its manufacturer warranties in place. It's still got its service plans in place. But that leads us all back to actually finding out all this information that we need to find out. The one thing that I've always said is very important when it comes to buying a used vehicle is, first and foremost, seeing the vehicle in person. Their pictures can do amazing things, and you can see a vehicle that looks absolutely perfect in a picture. But when you go see it in person, it's very important to look at paintwork, seeing if what they refer to as orange peel is prevalent in the vehicle. Orange peel would refer to a bad paint job that's been done on a car. So when they do generally respray a vehicle, you'll see that there'll be a warped effect that you can see on the paintwork. And for some people, they don't notice that. But for others who've got a keen eye, you can actually pick out that this car has been resprayed. Because naturally, if it's been resprayed, you're going to ask the question, was it in an accident? Another important thing that I'd say is looking at certain grooves and screws on the front of the vehicle. So generally what we do is that we pop the hood of the car and open up the bonnet, look at the engine bay, see if there are any screws, because on the side of the vehicle, you can always see the manufacturer where they've screwed in the vehicle and put it all together. So generally with a vehicle that has been in an accident, you'll notice that there'll be misalignment on those screws and the washers. You can see that someone's fiddled, someone's taken something off, perhaps a bumper or a part of the front end. So things like that are just good ways that you can view it, just looking at the vehicle, seeing the condition of the vehicle. But then if you want to use technology, one of the interesting ways we can do that is obviously getting something like a DEKRA report. And obviously DEKRA is the kind of organization that will be able to assess a vehicle, tell you if the vehicle's been in an accident. So if you're buying a vehicle from a dealership, you can actually ask them, does it have a DEKRA report? And they should be able to provide you the history of the vehicle at the same time. It does also get even more interesting now if you start buying into the premium sector. Because if you're buying, for instance, a used Mercedes-Benz or a BMW or even a VW or a big brand that is known in the country, with the VIN number of the vehicle, you can actually go to your local dealership and ask for the history of the vehicle. In a premium brand, what's good about that is that if you're buying, let's say, a BMW or a Mercedes, you can actually go and ask them, does the vehicle have any comments or notes on the car? Because with a car like that, if it's still within its motor plan or maintenance plan, if it isn't an accident, they have to lodge that onto the vehicle's VIN and say that at this mileage, this vehicle came in for a repair. It cost us 100,000 Rand. It cost us 50,000 Rand. So by just asking those questions, even if you're buying from a non-franchise dealer and there's a VW or a BMW or any premium mark that you want to get more information on, you can simply phone the local dealership and actually get that kind of information there. So that's one of few ways that you can actually get the history on the vehicle to see if it's been in an accident or not. But I feel like I'm talking too much.
No, I'm downloading as you're speaking because so the DEKRA thing is interesting to me. So just to clarify, that's a standalone company. They're not part of they're not linked to a motor manufacturer.
No. So they are a standalone company. So for instance, you'll see that platforms like We Buy Cars, for instance, they will say to you, we can supply you with a DEKRA report on the vehicle or not. It's just a body that is used to be able to assess a vehicle to see if it's in the correct condition. And it gives you a peace of mind, as a consumer, knowing that that vehicle has been assessed by the right people and they can actually vouch for the car. Because besides that, then it's going to be the person that's selling you the vehicle and they're going to tell you that, everything is perfect. Meanwhile, that is not always the case.
So I think that's a power insight for someone who does actually end up buying from another individual. Is even if you're the potential buyer, you could say, well, I'm happy to buy the car, but I'm going to pay for a DEKRA report before I transfer any other money, and then if it all goes well, no problem, I'll buy the car. If it doesn't go well, you keep the car.
Exactly that. And there also are other bodies as well. I know when I was selling cars, we used to do an HPI report as well, and it can tell you similar things as well. And I think what that does is that they're very switched on in that they work with insurers, so that if this vehicle ever went to this panel shop or that panel shop, for instance, they will be able to log that and see, okay, this car came in for these repairs, so it was in there for, and it did have an accident at this and this time. And a car being in an accident is one thing that we need to clear up as well. A car being in an accident is not particularly a no-go all the time, because we know that there are fender benders that do happen. There are small little things that can happen within the vehicle. As long as you can, trace back exactly what happened. If there was a 10,000 Rand little fender bender that happened on, let's say, used Audi that you want to buy, I wouldn't say that should be something that needs to deter you from buying that vehicle. Of course, if the repairs are 50, 100, 200,000 Rand, which does happen, you need to start asking questions. Because at the end of the day, with certain brands, For instance, you look at like an Audi, a headlight could cost you 25,000 Rand. So maybe a headlight cracked and they had to replace it, but with labor and all that, now it becomes a 50,000 Rand accident. It can look way more expensive than what it really was. But the most important thing is making sure that you ask the relevant questions, and make sure that the guys aren't telling you lies. Because unfortunately, in the automotive industry, when certain dealers want to sell cars, they can easily omit certain things, and then the customer pays for it in the end. And that's obviously what we want to avoid.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people say, no, I don't want to buy someone else's lemon, or I don't want to buy a secondhand car because it's definitely going to be a lousy car. There's no reason someone else would sell it, and I think that's a mistake because a lot of the time people buy cars on ego and on emotion. So there's some people that always want a new car, and they're going to sell that car after 3 years, no matter what. Even if they've had a great experience, there's a new model out, they want to drive the latest. So simply avoiding used cars because you're worried about the quality of the car, I think, is a huge mistake. And getting that peace of mind from either buying from a reputable dealership or a DEKRA, for me, has I mean, I didn't know about DEKRA, but I think that buying from a quality dealership has always been a huge piece, kind of source of peace of mind for me. I also think you were asking me about my other considerations, and I think one of them will be around mileage of the car. So it bothers me, if I buy a car where it looks like they've been doing sort of 60, 70,000 Ks in the car every year. I think I think maybe I'm interested to hear your view, but I think a car that's done sort of 30,000 Ks on average per 12 months is about right. I think that would be, to me, the norm for most people driving to and from work in South Africa. But I would be scared of very high mileage. Obviously, very low mileage per year is lovely because it means the person's really probably hasn't used their car much. So if you can buy kind of a 4-year-old car that's done 20,000 Ks, that's a winner. I mean, that to me sounds like something that hasn't had to work that hard. But I think for me that the mileage is a real consideration. And then I don't know if it's silly to look at, but I always look at the hubcaps of the car as well. I want to see, are those hubcaps or wheels or mag wheels or whatever? I don't generally get cars with mag wheels, but are those like massively scrapped? Because it also just tells me something about the care and attention that the driver's paid to that car. 100%.
And when it comes to finding out those small little things, the small things can actually tell quite a big story. And exactly like you're saying, if you see that all the wheels are scuffed on the vehicle, there's a chance that person did not take care of that car as well as they should have. And like you say, when it comes to mileage, it is quite a tricky one because depending on the type of car that you're buying, that's where you can expect certain type of mileages. For instance, I look at the example of my family. We recently bought an SUV, and within the SUVs that we're looking for, most SUVs have got higher mileage compared to a hatchback, for instance, because if you look at the specific type of SUV you're looking at, it's the kind of car that's been driven long distances. It's gone to Durban, it's gone to Cape Town, it's gone to various places. So you can adjust your mileage expectation according to the vehicle that you're looking at. So an SUV, naturally, you're going to probably have higher miles. A city vehicle, on the other hand, you also want something that's got lower miles because you would assume that the car's just done the normal run around, it's done the shop run, it's done the school run. But at the same time, having lower miles is always not the best thing when it comes to specific models. For instance, if I'm buying a performance vehicle that is, let's say, 10 years old, which sounds like an older car, but that's a 2012 model now. And nowadays, you do get a lot of 2012 performance vehicles out there. And if they've got too low of mileage, especially a performance car, you would be a bit wary because you'd ask yourselves, in that period of time, that 10 years, that's where now things can break because the vehicle also has not been used too much. Because cars are kind of like us humans. They need to be used. They don't want to park off and do nothing because that's when things go wrong at the same time. Seals break, things crack because the car's just sat for a long period of time. So I think a healthy amount of mileage would be exactly like you say, anything between 20, 30,000 Ks a year. I would even say if you can find something slightly less than that, 15,000 Ks a year, that would be great. But one just needs to obviously look at the application that vehicle's been used in. If you're going to be looking for used Land Rovers, for instance, most of the cars that you're going to buy, even if they're 5-6 years old, they're going to be all over 100,000 kilometers because most people are going to use those vehicles for long distances. But the upside to that is those cars are also built to do 300,000, 400,000 if they're properly maintained, whereas something like a small little hatchback might not probably see that type of mileage over its life cycle. But it is a very important thing to look at. Another thing when it comes to just how the previous person took care of the vehicle is if it does have a maintenance plan, seeing what was done during those services. So those 15 to 20,000 kilometer increments, if you see that at 30,000 kilometers, this car got a turbo replaced, and then at 45,000 kilometers, something else was replaced, like a cylinder head or something, then you can start seeing that this car might actually be a lemon. But if you see that maybe all the services are just general oil change, and then from there, it was a major, minor service, and then maybe closer to like 90, 100,000 kilometers, a cam belt was done, or something major was done at a higher mileage, you can see that this vehicle was built to manufacturer standards. Because sometimes you do get cars that at 20,000 kilometers, they can actually just break on you. And you do get those cars that were not built on the best days, perhaps after a boozy weekend and the manufacturers had a bit of a tough one.
The long weekend car. But I also think that it's maybe just that's the lovely thing about cars is, everyone's going to have different tastes. For me, there's no chance I'll buy the kind of performance. I'm not going to say performance car. I probably wouldn't buy that anyway, but I'm certainly not going to buy the souped up version of a hot hatch or the souped up version of a sedan or something, because my view on those cars again is that I just think that's someone who's bought that car to kind of brag and to show off and to go drifting on weekends and all of that stuff. And I just don't want to buy a car like that. I know the car fundies would say that some of these cars are rare. There might be special kind of limited editions, and that's great. That's wonderful for someone else to buy. But for me, I don't view cars. I know there are some cars that are hugely collectible, and that's a different story. But I think your hot hatch that that's got some special stickers on and extra low mags and tinted windows and a big kind of fin at the back, someone else can buy that. I want something that's going to get me from point A to point B reliably. I want to pay a fairly low, the lowest price I can for the safest car I can. And then also I think the fuel efficiency story is coming into it now. I think we're there now. We're in a space where buying the hot hatch, all you're guaranteeing is that you're going to end up paying a huge amount on fuel costs versus the car that might be slightly slower, but not slow and potentially more reliable because the engine is not working as hard. It's not under as much stress as something with major turbos and all the like. So I guess, that's the wonderful thing about cars. Some people will be saying that I must be a grandfather or something for not wanting to buy those, but it's great. I'm happy to miss out on that. I think and maybe that's a key point is, buying a second-hand car, you have to decide your primary purpose. You have to say, what's the main thing I want out of this? Is it to go racing on weekends? Obviously legally and all those things, but is it that, or is it to get from robot to robot as fast as possible? Or is it to move my wife and children from point A to point B as safely as possible and as reliably as possible? Or, I want to do the long family holidays, and we need to know that we can do long road trips without breaking down and not spending a fortune on fuel. I think it's key to have all of that clear in your head before you start, Googling for cars to buy, because it's easy to get emotional about a car.
100%. And you've summed it up so beautifully. And I think this appeal goes out to a lot of the younger folk who are in this space right now, because a lot of people, and I find myself in this position as well. You find yourself looking for a used vehicle, and that your rational self says, I need to get myself something that's fuel efficient, that's going to not be too bad on maintenance. And then what happens is that you see something that is more performance based at the same price, and then you end up going that route, and then it breaks and it's high on fuel. And there's a lot of consumers out there who are probably driving GTIs that could have probably been much better off as little Polo TSIs, and they would have been much happier for it. So that's the one piece of advice that I think is solid gold for a lot of, especially younger consumers who are still caught up in that state of buying a car for your ego. So in the long term, you're going to be much better suited buying something that is more fuel efficient, that's something that is going to be better from a maintenance perspective, especially now when we're looking at 20 Rand plus a litre. So if you want a performance car and if you can afford it, and that's good to go, I reckon go for it. But if you're still in that space where you're looking for something that's going to be a daily runner, rather go the rational route. And I think everyone should rather follow your example, because that's how you make your money work for you, as opposed to you working for it.
Yeah, my ego is linked to my investment account balance, and not the low profile ties and the big fin on my car.